The thing that's dominating a lot of the conversation tonight is the Education Secretary, Gillian Keegan. She has been recorded on camera suggesting, I think actually I'll play you a clip so you can listen to what she had to say.
But we will get a plan and every single one of them will be done.
OK, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone ever say, you know what, you've done a good job because everyone else has sat on their and done nothing? No signs of that, no?
Spicy. What did you think to that? Was you sitting there going, actually, do you know what, pack it in. She's just a human being, after all, a little bit frustrated with the interview, as she says it was aimed at. Although, who knows, the mind boggles. Alex has been in touch saying, Jube, she's got you all talking about her swearing now and not the schools crisis. He reckons, or she reckons, Alex, that this perhaps was a PR coup.
Well, I like Alex's name, but I don't like Alex's theory because... I mean, people always see conspiracy behind everything. I can tell you this is not the dream of your average spinner. And you've got two here with you. And the person who advises the Secretary of State is behind the camera, head in hands, when this sort of thing happens. Look, on the one hand, you can argue, Secretary of State, lot on her plate. We all, from time to time, say something in what we think is a private conversation we might not wish to be broadcast on international television and shared globally on the internet. On the other hand, most of us doing media training learn very quickly to treat every camera as if it's live. And I think that's a useful lesson, once again, underscored today.
Well, yes. I mean, if any of you guys have watched since the start of GB News, you would be familiar. I was once thrown on air in the middle of an ad break. I had absolutely no idea how I was not saying
yes, you were telling a story. You were to me, in fact.
Yeah, how I was not saying some choice. Instead, I was putting my lipstick on. I got off mildly, I can tell you.
Well, but actually, that's you, right? And the problem with, I mean, Alex, of course, is completely right, and the rule is you never ever speak in front of a microphone, because it always might be on. But the problem with it is she's feeling sorry for herself. And I mean, it's incredible. She's had a whole summer to sort this one out. And then she says to the parents, no, you can't go. You can't get your kids back to school. Parents are furious. They are in bits. Nobody quite knew whether it was their school or not. I mean, and then she says...
But that's not the order of events, though, is it? And this is what I think she's getting frustrated about, because you're saying she had a whole summer to sort this out. If you believe at face value what the government are telling us, what Gillian, etc., are saying to us, what Nick Gibb, the school minister, was saying as well, what has happened? So the reason that this has all become apparent and, you know, all kind of very last minute is apparently over the last kind of few weeks, a few beams, I think there was 3 or something panels, which had previously been listed as non-critical, so i.e., you know, no edge and you don't need to close it down tomorrow. Some of those things had then collapsed, which had then made the government reassess proactively, do you know what, we need to accelerate this and do it now.
Actually, these warnings had been going on for years. I mean, a beam collapsed in a school in Kent.
In 2018?
Yeah, absolutely.
Primary school.
And actually, that's when they should have checked every school. I mean, no question. I mean, Gillian Keegan's right. She's had... I've forgotten how many. Is it 5 education secretaries before her who didn't do anything? Gavin Williamson didn't take any notice of anything the whole time, and she's got to pick up the pieces, and so she's cross. So in that way, she's right. But actually, they have had warning after warning after warning, and nobody did anything.
So
that's the problem.
Let's put aside the language she uses. I take your point about why blame the person who's actually doing something rather than those who didn't do something and predated that person in the role. But of course, the use of this material in construction dates back, I think it's the 50s to the 90s. And the point is that a lot of these schools were built with a 30-year planned life. Well, first of all, that seems a remarkably short-sighted thing to do, but let's put it to one side. We needed more schools, and that's how we built. It's not just in schools. It's in hospitals, magistrates' courts, other kinds of municipal buildings. And plenty of hospitals, so I know, are, you know, they've got metal struts that have been put around to hold up these beams and areas of rotting, effectively, concrete or insufficiently stable concrete. The point being, I think, that people thought it was, you know, bad but stable. And then at some point, if these are the facts we've been given. At some point over the summer, it became clear that at least in some cases that was wrong. But the previous assumptions that it was a reliable rate of decay and you could work out when you needed to act, those assumptions no longer applied and things were posed danger. And then I suppose you've actually got to give some credit to a government minister who says, you know what, I'm going to get this in the neck. Schools are supposed to open next week. But everywhere this applies, we're not going to open the school.
And what happened if one beam fell down?
Exactly. Exactly.
I actually think. I think it's what's so amazing about this building a school for 30 years is that both my children, who went to different primary schools because we moved house, were in Victorian schools that are still there and still have people going in and out, and both schools have been there for 100 years. And so, Alex, you're completely right that actually this short-termism, and I'm not blaming either party, right? It's politicians, right, yeah. Absolutely, is the problem. But I mean, the Shadow Secretary of State for Education asked 156 times about school buildings. I mean, school buildings have been
What do you mean she was asked 156
She asked in Parliament over 100 times, over 150 times, what is happening about school buildings. This wasn't just crumbling concrete. I mean, there are real problems about school buildings. And ironically, when she was at school in the 90s, because she's very young, compared to me, she was taught, I don't know whether it was crumbling concrete, but she was taught in classrooms with struts, and says that actually it's pretty awful being taught like that.
I was just reflecting on what you just made me. It's what alcoholics call a moment of clarity when you realise you're the same age as the Secretary of State you're talking about. So I was at school in the 90s too, at least when I left school, but I was at primary school in the 80s, and I had a middle school, it was a three-school system. And each of them, my primary, middle and upper school, all had terrapins. They all had little like caravan units, statics that we were taught in. Each of the schools, we had classrooms that you were in for at least a home year, where they were like these big static caravan things. And so school buildings have been inadequate in our state system for some time.
One of the things that I was quite interested in is she was expressing a frustration today, Gillian Keegan, when she was caught on the microphone. Yeah. And when she was probed in a follow-up interview about who was that aimed at, I think what she was kind of saying was it was aimed at the interviewer. The interviewer was probing her. And then she went on to say that actually she's put out all these questionnaires to these schools and she's not got a big response. So I thought to myself, if I was Gillian Keegan, I would now be mindful to perhaps consider naming and shaming the schools. Because if what she is saying is true, that this situation is elevated to critical, if you've got schools that for whatever reason are not responding to your requests for questionnaires, name and shame them.
Well, I hate to sound like I'm being a backroom lawyer, but just if you be a bit forensic about that, her reply that it was aimed at the interviewer might apply to why doesn't somebody give me credit for doing an effing good job. It can't apply to the second clause, which is while others were sitting on their bottoms, right?
Yeah.
That's not about the interviewer. Now, that might be about the LEAs, it might be about headmasters, it might be about her predecessors as education secretary, it might be about the people who built the school, it might be about the opposition, but it can't be about the interviewer. So that definitely explains part one. It can't explain part two.
But also, she knew that she was going to get tough questions. I mean, what do you expect when you say to parents, no, you can't go back to school? I mean, that's the job, frankly.
Yeah, and, it's not been well communicated, not least because some of these schools, it's only one classroom. And some of these schools...
It's just a corridor, it can be,
Kids were only out... I mean only, I know it's disruptive and I know it's half of parents, I don't mean to be flippant, but it was a single day of learning remotely. So, they could have explained this a lot better. It's not the full 100.
In a very, very bizarre twist of fate, when I took my child to nursery today, he couldn't go into nursery because the ceiling had collapsed. How random
was that crumbling concrete or just...
No, what that was a burst water thing or something. Anyway, long story short, the ceiling collapsed. So we all turned up. They couldn't contact us parents because they had no electricity, apparently, so they couldn't email us. They had no phone, database or whatever. So I can assure you it is deeply inconvenient when you have no childcare. But look, like I said, we're troopers on GB News. We're here anyway.